Greetings. Buenos días. Good morning. I am Dr. Chenzira Kahina, and I serve as a director with institutional affiliations with perankh Khamniversity Institute. As the director, I am the former director of the Virgin Islands Caribbean Cultural Center, nestled inside of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at the University of the Virgin Islands. And I currently serve as the Vice President of the Caribbean Studies Association. And it's an honor. I'm very humbled and privileged to be a part of this very esteemed collection of scholars, professionals that are really taking language education, tourism, as well as cultural heritage to the next level in the 21st century. I also give my thanks and appreciation to the language department of the Orlando Fernández Montes Tourism Training Center in Santiago de Cuba, with these workshops being convened on teaching foreign languages in the service industry from April 21st to the 22nd of this year, 2022. I would be remiss if it did not speak very favorably and give a special thanks to Nuria, Sister Nuria, who was kind enough, Sister Nuria Garcia, who was kind enough to be very welcoming to us during various engagements with the Casa de Cultura several years ago, to be a part of the festivals of culture surrounding Santiago de Cuba, particularly for our delegation that came from the wider Virgin Islands of the United States. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to continue this work. So my presentation, and we'll keep it as short as we are possibly allowed to, is on innovative multilingualism for cultural heritage education, media, and tourism inside of the Caribbean Americas. And it took a moment to express this particular piece, primarily because of the following elements. The abstract that has been submitted is a very short overview of a larger project on language education being intrinsically linked to the tourism industry, and specifically looking at the relation between tourism and education. And in order to have that discussion on tourism and education, we are looking at self-expression, how persons acquire knowledge, the actual learning process, appreciative inquiry, yes. We're looking at lifelong learning. We're looking at various ways that language education and language training need to be a part of the educational process to then enhance what tourism industry education are able to produce. And then showing that connection between the study of tourism, the connection with schools and universities, which are very much so tied to literacy, multilingual literacy. The abstract streamline that's shared herein is in alignment with research and best practices of the Ministries of Education and Tourism of the Republic of Cuba. The innovative multilingualism for cultural heritage education, media, and tourism project was developed to do several things. These are just a short overview of those pieces in this particular research study and project. To methods of complementing service industry training frameworks within the ministries and departments of tourism, strengthening sustainable educational training, assessment, and evaluation for training and teaching, creating effective social media networking skills in alignment with interculturalism, specifically within the Caribbean Americas, across English, Spanish, Papiamento, Dutch, French, and in many instances, Portuguese, because that would encompass the entire Americas, and how that works for economic development. Multilingualism and multiculturalism are essentials within tourism. So you don't get one without the other. Language education, educational inquiry, as well as tourism all work together, specifically here in the Caribbean Americas. So there's a political, social element, as the diagram shares herein. There are legal ramifications, which do tie to environmental factors as well. There's an ecological type of tourism. There's the cultural tourism. There's sightseeing tourism. There's a technological element of tourism. And you'll see as the diagram presents, tourism is intertwined with education. And what is shared is in that space in the center around educational tourism, which brings in the cultural heritage, the language literacy, lifelong learning, student exchange programs, et cetera, which we're hoping to be able to expand and share in the near future. Some of the issues that remain prevalent among language educators are the fact that they are actually impacted and inculcated by extensive knowledge within standard-based curricula, evidence-based lesson plans that are essential for development, the pedagogical strategies among academic learners and tourism industry professionals, so that there is a synergy between tourism industry professionals, language education professionals, and all of the elements, the students, the cultural tradition bearers, the businesses, the economic drivers that are part of this tourism-based language education fusion, yes? There's also essentials within 21st century regional, global, and cultural heritage, as well as sustainable tourism industries. In other words, tourism is evolving and is becoming more integrated with technology, as well as a deeper respect for cultural heritage resources and all that comes with that. So language and multilingual literacy has to be at the center of that particular work. There's also a thrust towards humanistic management systems for tourism and language education programming. In other words, tourism and language education are lifelong partners that provide creative strategies that have to be implemented, whether it's in Cuba, the Virgin Islands, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, Haiti, Puerto Rico, or throughout our Caribbean region. And I need to include, Panama, Costa Rica, amongst the Raizal nations, and in places like Isla Providencia, small spaces we tend to overlook. This particular publication provided some guidance in regard to the research objectives and methodology that was used for the preliminary research objectives that focused on what elements were prioritized in language education in the Caribbean Americas for effectively teaching tourism industry professionals. That's always been an inquiry. The second preliminary research objectives included what standards of excellence were required for intercultural and multilingual social media development and education in the Caribbean Americas. How do we translate these language education methods within the tourism industry and then take it forward using technology, social media, et cetera? And how do we maximize our effectiveness to have the best outcomes? This has been shared through the Teaching English for Tourism, Bridging Research and Praxis by Joseph and Petrie. And I think it's really important to see that what is in some of the work and research in these areas, it's around, yes, the research, but then the praxis of what are we actually producing? What are we actually developing in our respective curricula? And the methodology for this ongoing research praxis project does include data collection, analysis, mixed methods that are concurrent with various designs that provide qualitative as well as quantitative data to look at things separately and then redo the comparisons so that we can cross-validate, do some confirmations, and of course, finalize what our research findings are. And again, it's an ongoing process. Some of the outcomes navigated around various geographic enablers, as well as looking at the types of tourism, the types of enablers that exist in the tourism industry, and then connecting the dots beyond the socio-political realm, the religious realm, the sports, competitive, environmental elements, and being able to pull that into how does language education become central to how we bring the multilingualism as well as the multiculturalism together in the tourism industry. So we did recognize variables of different tourism types that impact language education and the needs and the strategies. We did observe that within the research questions and preliminary findings initiated a significant amount of discussion amongst the respondents and participants in this particular project. There were multidimensional challenges that were inclusive of accountability concerns, enablers, and of course, profitability, because at the end of the day, profitability does have its role in the tourism industry as well as in language education. Priorities of community development and language acquisition, challenged by governmental bureaucratic limitations, because sometimes the process of even acquiring systems of engagement between multilingualism and multiculturalism within the tourism industry and the education ministries becomes challenged. And then of course, there were recommendations to reduce the number of inquiries, the number of questions, the number of participants in the respective project. So sometimes people forget about dreamtime.com, and it gives another educational flavor of how language education and language literacy are at the center of the tourism industry and that they go hand in hand. So some conclusive revelations included diversity, equity and inclusion disparities within the Caribbean Americas, across languages, across economic development, accessibilities, also proactive integration of language education programs and institutes to strengthen productivity of tourism industries, and also institutionalization of multilingual and multicultural new media technologies to really prioritize cultural heritage tourism regionally and outside of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which your respective ministries of education and tourism in Cuba have been very central to pushing the next level of engagement quite successfully. And of course, increasing timeline for this project, because this was done in a relatively short amount of time, less than a year. Here are some of the selected references, some of my work around Indigenous Native Africans and Amerindians, culture, heritage, and identity in the Virgin Islands, Caribbean Americas, and Bonaire. That was a study that was part of the Islands in Between conferences conducted in 2018, and this research is ongoing. Also looking at enhancing tourism education by Lucia, Della, and Dimanche, as well as it's an entire collection of scholars that have been looking at the publishing and the contribution of humanistic management journal. I think it's important for persons to know that these types of studies, so the link is there available for persons to review for their own purposes. And then also the work of Dr. Humphrey Regis on academic agnostic elaboration, particular to some of what has transpired within CARICOM and what he refers to as CARICOMmoners, and some of the educational pieces that sometimes get missing or excluded from our respective areas and spaces. I could go on. I was given a particular amount of time, and I want to respect that. It's an honor and a privilege again to share on innovative multiculturalism and as well as multilingualism, and to bring this particular theme on innovative multilingualism for cultural heritage, education, media, and tourism in the Caribbean Americas to a final close. Again, my name is Dr. Chenzira Kahina. My institutional affiliations have been shared, and I'm really honored, and I wish all the best in this convening for the language department of the Orlando Fernández Montes de Oca Tourism Training Center in Santiago de Cuba, with these workshops on teaching foreign languages in the service industry. It's been a pleasure. wishing you all the best.